Oh, there we go. Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. We want to discuss collaboration, industry collaboration, because we find it's an issue that's coming up on a consistent basis. And actually, we find it also splits audiences completely. So it'd be really interesting in your views today. We've had a letter saying that the industry has never been better represented. So why do we keep writing about greater collaboration, which is understandable. But what are your thoughts on that? At the same time, we're getting a lot saying, wouldn't it be great if we can actually get everyone working better together, sharing greater knowledge? And how can we achieve that? So this does seem to be a just general split in terms of how people view the marketplace. And particularly when it comes to the Scottish sector, I think it's fair to say. So there's undoubtedly going to be some very different views. That's what we really want to explore today, and then try to see how we can actually find a way through this to see what's the right thing. Alex, can I bring you in at this point? You're on mute.
Again, I've never heard anyone say unmute Alex, but first time for everything. Welcome everyone, I hope you're all well. Thank you for joining us again today. Chris and I have been discussing this quite a bit over the last few weeks with Lauren, and just trying to work out, so there are industry bodies out there that ostensibly represent the sector, the diverse sector in which we work. But a lot of people say that it's not representing them or their specific business, or if it is representing them, it's hard to get their particular voice heard, or that it might represent them better if so-and-so happened or such and such happened. So we were trying to work out, there's a lot of chat, and this has been going on for years. Chris said it's been going on since he started out in the industry, people talking about the fact that nothing actually changes. There's a lot of talk about this, and we're keen to try and move it forward. And we'd be keen to know from you guys, who are the operators out there? Who are you members of? So there's the STA, there's the Scotland Food and Drink, there's Scottish Wholesale Association, there's a whole load of organisations out there that represent the industry. But if you are members, what do you get out of it? And if you're not members, why aren't you members? Have you heard that maybe, you know, or have you experienced it before and fallen off their radar, or do you just not use their organisations? And lastly, if you're not members of those organisations, what do you think that a new collective could do, and how do we approach it better? Because ultimately, it's a diverse industry. We need to approach government, but it's not just about government. You know, a lot of these organisations that are out there already are political, very political, and their hands are tied to some degree. So, what is the best way forward so we can actually get something together and get things moving? Over to you.
I think there's two other things. Obviously, Tom Lewis is obviously part of the well-known letter sent to government. Has it had a response, question mark, and should it had a response, because it's about 3 weeks now. But also, are we actually talking about a voice to government, or are we talking about industry working and collaborating better together? So actually how we share knowledge and how we share ideas, which can actually be completely different to how we talk about a voice to government. What I find when we're doing this, the first thing that always comes back to me is UKH are doing a fantastic job. We've got better voices than ever to government, but actually that's not often what people are talking about. What people are talking about is actually how industry can work better, companies can work better together to share knowledge, ideas, and best practice. So what is it we're actually talking about at the same time, question mark. John, can I bring you in here? Because I know you're on a short span today, and I know you have some good views.
Yeah, well, I actually got a phone call there about a meeting I'm pulling together today, so I wasn't really listening for a wee while there, sorry. So Andy from Maclean, which I'm sure a lot of you will know, he operates down in London, and he operates at the north here as well. So I'm pulling together a discussion forum today for food service outlets. So 3 key operators, and there's 25 others joining. And that is really for what we're up to is a regional food group, just try to form a regional food group. I'm doing that personally. And I hope that that becomes in a forum, a pusher, a group collaboration between producers, food service outlets, consumers. Too much to say for now. But once I get the traction going from today, I hope that our regional food group will in fact have a forum, a medium, and a body that we can push for our region. And my proposal is that, there is, that's why I have to go. There's another call at 10:30 with all the regional food groups of Scotland. Most regions have one. Is that the body? So it's a question, it's not really an answer, I guess, but is that a body that each can use to push? In my own opinion, there's so many bodies out there, but I'm not quite sure which is the right one if to bring it all together. Potentially it's Scotland Food and Drink, Tourism Alliance, I don't know. It's really an open forum, but there is a clear gap for not only you guys, but for producers. There's not a challenging body, if you like, as a whole for the producer sector either. So.
Thank you, John. Lawrence, can I bring you in at this point?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of things. I'm just relatively new, so I'm not a member of any organisation, but I did start to look at it as a result of being in this group, and it's pretty obvious to me, certainly talking from a Scottish point of view, that there isn't a relevant body for me to join that would represent some of the issues that I have working in the workplace and running a work cafe. And the more I look at them, the majority of them, certainly in Scotland, are funded by the government. So I think there's two things. There's the collaboration between ourselves, which is definitely an issue, and the body that speaks to the government. Well, we need to speak to this. We have to have somebody that speaks to the Scottish government. That might be UKH or not. I don't know. I don't think they have an organisation up here. I know they have a representative, but I don't think they have an organisation. And it strikes me that we're such a diverse industry, it's very difficult to cover all the industries in places like Scotland Food and Drink. And I don't particularly want to pick on them, but the representation of our industry, and certainly my part of it, is not on that group. And it's funded by the Scottish government. So my view, and I've spoken to John about it, is regional formations of groups that are in the same type of industry is the way to go. And maybe they get together and feed into a larger, potentially UK organisation, maybe UKH, if there are government things that they want pushed, if there are those sorts of issues that they want raised. So it needs something. I'm not quite sure what the structure is. It just strikes me, because we're so different in Scotland in terms of the government and other areas that we have control over, that a regional focus is the way to go. Pull it together on a Scottish national basis, I don't mean politically, in order to have some sort of cohesive voice. Chris?
Yep, sorry. Yeah, I think that's right. Tom, can I bring you in here? Tom Lewis?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you obviously have a lot of big views on this last week.
Yeah, I mean, we've had great traction from news outlets and information, but I mean, from a point of coming back, I mean, I've been doing some back channel work, and it's pretty depressing, actually, what's happening in government. It's meant to be non-political and everything else. And I think as an industry body, it's so difficult, because we've generated all these headlines, but feel like we're not getting anything back at the moment. The main thing we've been pushing really for is the 2 metre, bring it down to 1. And I had some pretty depressing news last night from a very senior person who didn't tell me anything, but edged to the fact that there is no conversation about 2 metre ruling at the present moment in time within the policies. I think rates, I think VAT, I think we all agreed VAT was a lovely idea, but we've got to pay for this somehow, and VAT will be done later. But business rates, I think, as one thing, if we all came together on just one thing, I really think, and I think we have to be aspirational about how we do it, so that people join our cause. I think quite often what happens with these things, someone's really good, and we need to have the right people to inspire other people and to lead by example and say, look, we've actually done this. And I think keeping quite focused on what we want to achieve is really important at the initial stages. And I think we've got to come up. I mean, if you look at all the main groups, Food and Drink, Tourist Board, STA, they all do their thing. But unfortunately, how do we take one bit of all that and make that a focus thing right now, instead of export, instead of whiskey, instead of all these different things? We've actually got to say, as an industry, if we want to survive next year, let's all look at business rates. And then that covers every single person. And it gets us all speaking in the same way. I mean, like I said, we haven't had a huge amount of traction back, but it's quite depressing what's going on at the moment. It's almost like it's too soon for them. They're using the 3 week behind England not as an excuse, but as a reason not to get back.
That's an interesting comment. Marco, can I bring you in here? Because I know this is something you've looked at over the years. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I have the scars, although they're now quite not as recent. But I remember my first week as chief executive of EPCIS.com, and now is a few years ago, when Bob Cotton gave me a little bit of advice. And he said, Marco, if you try to speak to the whole of the tourism industry in Scotland, you'll never get anywhere. What you have to do is to realize that the industry is highly fragmented. Sorry, I'll rephrase that, is highly eclectic. And as such, every small and large group have different requirements. What you have to do is to relentlessly engage with each group, because the large groups will have different requirements from the small groups. And indeed, the two they're not often reconciled with one another. So yes, there is on the surface, a high degree of engagement with the large groups. But there is quite a lot of noise out there where the individual providers of tourism services, they feel out on the limb. And the only thing that seems to work just now is the personal network, where the very simple yet quite important questions on what do we do with pillows? Are we going to furlough pillows between one stay or another? What standard of cleanliness are we going to use? Are we going to be at the mercy of the large chemical providers who are going to try to sell the most expensive way to clean rooms in a post-COVID era? Those are very simple and yet fundamental questions, because when we are looking at the P&Ls of small businesses, decisions in each area will have a huge effect. Now, bringing a little bit of teaching from our fellow colleagues in Italy who are now reopening. Torre Maizza, Roccoforte, Masseria in Puglia is middle of June. My former resort, Verdura Resort, is opening on 26th of June. And indeed, things have shifted dramatically from the government position over a month and a half ago to the government position today. So the lessons learned are very, very simple. The accommodation providers that have invested heavily in equipment based on the government advice of 1.5 months ago are now superfluous because things have shifted and changed dramatically. So one of the teaching is don't go out and rush and buying all sorts of things, because just before we are ready to reopen, things will change. But as I believe Tom said earlier on, we're using the fact that we are potentially 3 weeks behind England as an excuse not to plan in advance. And if we're looking at some of the drafts documents that are circulating just now, and you'll know what I'm referring to, there is far too many holes. The industry needs answers today.
So what do you propose? Can I ask that?
Well, putting me on the spot is exactly what we've attempted to do several years ago. Now, we can't tour Scotland up and down and galvanize people in city halls or in schools or in conference centers. But via the medium of conference calls, video conference calls, we can engage with the small providers and ask their questions, get a bottom-up approach where the very simple questions are answered. So a series of Q&A with an approach that says, what is worrying you today? What are your priorities? What answers do you need to receive for you to not just reopen, but break that threshold of break even and turning it into profitability?
That's very interesting. David, I think you probably agree with some of that, don't you?
Mark, oh, right. I think you've just spoken the most utter sense that I've heard for a long, long time. There is this divide between large business and small businesses. It's particularly prevalent in Scotland, but it's all over the UK. Small businesses want to know what they've got to do tomorrow. And my fear, as much as Marco just suggested, that government may predict that the industry should do something now, which is capital expensive, and it'll be superfluous as time goes on. But we have to remember there is a consumer out there who has a fear, and a fear of going into places, and how do you make it hospitable for people to go there again, and reassure them that it's worthy. As I said to you earlier on, I'm not too certain about putting my head on a pillow that somebody else has had. I don't know how other countries have dealt with pillows and mattresses. This is information that ought to be shared. I'm very lucky. I only provide one little outlet now, after all these years, and I can afford to shut it for 3 days or whatever, in order to say that it's completely free of virus. But if you're a provider with, say, 5 bedrooms or something like that, then you've got to reassure the customer coming in that that is really clean. And that worries me. And then, of course, we're rather late in this game of trying to influence government. There is nobody in place. But Marco, I agree with all that you have said. And it's very, very difficult to bring associations together. I spent 6-7 years doing that, or trying to do that, and I realized that there's not only the membership that you needed to require answers to, but you also the revenue stream from those people that you had to bear in mind. And I guess I always think back to the British Institute of Innkeeping, who had the National Licensee Certificate, which was, if you like, a license to operate. And I have a funny feeling that today there is something that could be arranged which gives the industry reassurance to start again, but also the consumer the confidence to come back into our establishments, which it may be hygiene-led or kite mark-led in some sort of way. But you know what body, I can't put my finger on it. HUK represent, I'm sorry, but they represent large businesses. They may have a lot of small members, but they speak for large operators, really. That's my view. I mean, I haven't got a simple solution, but I think Marco was on the point there. It's actually drilling down into the small operators and letting them have their views aired and answered. But who's going to do that?
Paul, can I bring you at this point? Because you're very much into campaigning for collaboration.
Yes, well, thank you very much for asking me to speak, Chris. As ever, the conversation is brilliant. I'm making copious notes here. I mean, I'm in agreement that there's all sorts of bodies that represent various parts of the industry. Scottish Licensed Trade Association is just one of them. But there are an awful lot out there, but they're all doing their own thing. They're all following their own agenda. I'm just thinking back to my old days working with the Langham Initiative here down in the Borders, where we set up an overseeing body, and then had subgroups underneath it. And I'm wondering whether there's an opportunity here to try and get all these different organisations to feed into an overriding body that then feeds information and becomes a lobbying organisation with specific strategic objectives and a specific strategic agenda. Because if we're going to go out there and start talking to politicians particularly, we've got to be focused in what we're talking about. going back to the taxation side of things, which is, I absolutely agree with. I think it's the business rate side of it that we stand more chance of getting somewhere with, particularly now. As far as VAT is concerned, my considered opinion and the considered opinion of my partner here, business partner here, is that if anything, VAT is going to go up, not down. I think the rates thing is the key to it, and I think we should be lobbying for rates to be dealt with in the same way as the majority of other forms of personal and business taxation is dealt with, and that's through the ability to pay, so a percentage of net profit or whatever. With regard to the small business side of it, I particularly agree with those comments. Our entire client base is small businesses, pubs, bars, restaurants, guest houses, small hotels, etc. And as was pointed out, they have very particular and specific issues that the larger businesses don't have. And a lot of it is down to the robustness of balance sheets, the ability to plan forward, etc. And those guys, they really need some help, and I put a comment on the thing just now. Maybe at some point in the future with one of these meetings, it will be worth inviting some representatives of those small businesses to get involved in specific conversations here. Anyway, I waffle on too much, but...
No, I think that's fair. Gary, how about your views on this?
Thank you, Chris. I agree with what Marco and David said regarding the larger organisations. Certainly in my time when I was chairing the Hotels Association, it was always challenging to get the corporates really involved because the managers were waiting for guidance from the centre. I think that's the same now, that we're waiting for guidance from the centres. So I always tried to concentrate very much on the independents and owner-operators and had significant success dealing through the chamber. And certainly recently I've been asked to work with the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, and they've identified from the work that they've been doing the last 2 months has been very much on grants, the loan schemes, and getting that information to direct to the business community, even to the point where they disbanded the membership rule and just helped business in general. It wasn't just the members. They went down and said, it doesn't matter about being a member, we need to help business. And certainly I've been very impressed, which is why I agreed with Liz Cameron up here in Scotland that I would help with them with the tourism and hospitality aspect, and certainly with their Ken Gomes representation. How can we help the chambers get the information that they need to start lobbying specifically on the business concerns, not just the sector concerns? So I think that's the main difference. One is the sector, as in the industry, which, as we all know, UKH, STA are doing a great job, whereas it's not really helping the ground roots, the ground floor roots of what's needed. Now, I was listening to, there's quite a medium-sized company up here, a restaurant company called Buzzworks, and I was listening to their webinar recently, and their MD was saying that, just what people have been saying, they are very nervous about spending capital on responding to this outbreak. If in 6 months, 9 months' time, that's just been a waste of money. To the point that they are doing all the risk assessments and everything. But their MD was saying, you're not going to be walking into my restaurants and seeing screens everywhere. You're not going to be walking in seeing a mass difference from where you were. But we will be very clean. We will have sanitizers. We will be obeying by the 2 meter distancing rule if that needs to be. But I feel that we need, or local industry, local businesses need to be dealing more with their bids, the business improvement districts, because they're a good lobbying opportunity, and that's direct to business. It's not just a sector. Certainly, again, I had huge success in Aberdeen, and I'm only referring to Aberdeen because I was based there for 10 years. But through dealing with the collaboration with the bid, which at that point I was vice chair, the DMO, the Hotels Association and the Chamber, we automatically got involved with the council, and it wasn't, it was leaders of council. It wasn't the the workers sort of thing. It was decision makers at council, which meant then that we had a voice in government. So I sit on the cross-party group with Scottish Government. So I think all in all, I think the voice that we need to be doing is from business, in my mind, to the chambers, because they are business related, not just sector related. And as I've said, I've been very impressed with the work that they've been doing on the overall lobbying on the grants and the furlough scheme and all that sort of thing. I mean, you know, the Scottish Chambers are having daily calls with the Scottish Government. I'm on a call this afternoon, being invited on to with Jamie Hepburn, one of the ministers' business. Today we're looking at retail as opposed to hospitality, but there will be a call raised about hospitality. I just needed some time to get my head around what I could help the Scottish Chambers with. Alex, obviously I'll bring you in at that point as well, because I think it's an opportunity for us to get more independents involved as opposed to the big corporates. So I agree with Marco. I think you're right. It's a case of the corporates are corporates and they're waiting for guidance, and maybe UK hospitality are dedicating a lot of resource to that side. But I think we have a role to play through collaborating with the businesses on the ground. That's my view.
That's very interesting.
I was just going to bring Tom back in. Tom, we've mentioned this before, but the letter that you co-signed with a whole load of other prominent restaurateurs and chefs and other people from the sector to the Scottish Government, am I right in understanding it hasn't had a response other than acknowledgement? I mean, that's been 2 or 3 weeks now, and I'm just wondering if there was a different body set up, how would you do things differently with that? Would you be bypassing the current organisations and going to knock directly on the government's door and saying, look, we're not going to let this lie, you know, because that's what happens sometimes with these correspondents. They, you know, there was great PR around it, there's a great campaign, and there was great coverage of it. But the danger is that it loses its edge because there's no one there to chap on the government's door and say, we want an answer, what are you doing about this?
I mean, I have to give Stephen Jardine, you know, all the credit, and Peter, you know, for actually getting us all together initially. And it was just through conversations which we'd all had with ourselves, and we all said we should come together. And I think, you know, on the very initial chat I had with them, I wanted to make sure the letter was copied in to Food and Drink, to SDA, to everybody. So, you know, we were just doing that as something ourselves. But I think it's very important to inform everybody else what we're doing. Because I think at the moment, everyone's just being, there's so much bombarded from so many different sectors. And, you know, if you think the way people are working now is quite different, working at home, you know, you used to be, if you sit in your office before and you hear from 3 different business sectors, you might ask the person on the desk beside you. Now, you know, it's all happening in slow motion. And I think, you know, we have had some feedback, but for me, I think it's been pretty poor. And I do think they've just used the fact that we are 3 weeks behind. That's given them time to try and come back to something with us. But I don't think that's an excuse. I think, you know, they must have quite clear guidelines of what they're trying to do in Scotland. You know, and I think I think at the beginning we had a perfect opportunity to come out with something really good here. And I would hate to lose that, because I think the longer these things go on, that's as you know, as people start going back to work, you know, you know, most small businesses, the biggest problem they have is actually physical time other than running their businesses. You know, and I think, you know, where the bigger companies have, people are dedicated to certain jobs. But I think with small business owners, a lot of your time is actually just spent running your business. And I think that is what's quite hard. What we don't want to lose is that momentum now of us coming together.
No, I'd agree on that. Gary, can I bring you in? Gary Maclean, can I bring you in?
From a college point of view, we're working on a worst case scenario. I mean, we're writing timetables just now. We're recruiting students. Lecturers have been advised that their T's and C's they have to work with the management to provide their service. So it's things like extended teaching hours at night, mostly working from home, all theory lessons done at home, Saturday opening, that sort of thing. And again, what I think in general in terms of hospitality, I don't think we're looking abroad enough. You know, you know, there's countries that have done it really well, and we don't seem to be looking at them. I mean, we've got lots of international partners, and we've been looking at them and how they've coped with it, you know, so we're taking the lead on good practice. And I don't know if we're looking abroad enough. And I totally agree with all the comments we're making. We're starting to make a bit of sense about spending money on, you know, perspex screens and all that sort of stuff. You know, but I think we need to look east and see what they are doing and how they've coped with it. Because at the minute,
and you're learning, who's impressed you? Can I ask?
How serious New Zealand are taking it. They've had very, very few cases. They've pretty much contained it, but they have they've come up with some really different stuff. I've put a message out. I'm on a group of lecturers. There's about 80 lecturers from about 60 countries on a group, and it's a great forum for actually finding out really what's happening. And I could see this happening on my phone before even the news and stuff was talking about it here. I mean, we all got together in February in India, and it was a real major talking point, because obviously we had lecturers from China and everywhere else there. So you could see this coming through this WhatsApp group. And, you know, it was kind of frustrating for me to sit and watch what other countries were going through, and we didn't even seem to have it as a news point. It was almost you know how we reported it. It was kind of China's problem at the time.
Do you think we've been too slow in how we respond?
I think 100%. The evidence is there that we were too slow. You look at the countries that shut their doors. I mean, we're talking about, you know, keeping people in quarantine now. It's too late. You know, I'm not a scientist, but, you know, next week we're going to put people in quarantine. You know, so.
Horses bolted.
Aye, the planes were coming in by their thousands every day while this epidemic was spreading through the world, and people like North Korea, who are very close to it, and New Zealand and places like that, just shut their doors. So the least country I see with the least information, believe it or not, is the United States. You know, the lecturing staff there, they're kind of talking as though they're over it. But I think they're a wee bit behind us, particularly out with New York. But in terms of the thing that cheers me up the most through my week is my actual college work, because we are talking about college as though it's already open. I know it's very different from opening a restaurant, but we have got the flexibility that we can extend our times. We can open at night, we can open at weekends, and extend our space. So we're kind of working really at this moment in time on a worst case scenario. I don't know how other faculties and other schools are going to deal with it. But, you know, the big thing for us is keeping as many people out the building as possible. You know, City of Glasgow College City Campus is designed for about 40,000 people. And a lot of you have probably been in there. You know, the amount of people that are in that building is incredible. So fundamentally, if you're not needed to be physically at your desk or in your classroom, you have to stay at home and work from home until further notice. And that's how we're tackling it. As of this year's cohort, the figure from about 3 weeks ago was 80% of students have been resulted. The feedback from the lecturing staff is that students are actually engaging with Microsoft Teams. They're turning up to classes on Teams. So you're getting 80 students at a time, which is incredible. You know, it's a different generation, and I think the more we do this, the more people get used to doing it, and the better we become at it. So, but from a college point of view, you know, it's a dark hour, but there is definitely a guiding light, and we will be open. We will be teaching one way or another come September.
Listening to everyone and listening to the chat, there seems to be two different parts to this equation. One is how do you get better representation or the voice with government, whether it's through business or whether it's through one of the bodies, and get some action. That's one part of it. And the other part seems to be about how we share knowledge between business. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely.
They seem almost two parts. Peter, can I bring you in at this point?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
I see you've had some views on chat. What are your views on all this?
Well, I mean, you know, property professionals are all parts of many industry bodies. You know, RICS governs ours, and as always, there's an element of discontent within the individuals because they feel that the industry and the institution doesn't necessarily cater for the small individual. And I think that's always the problem when you create a body that has considerable size and weight behind it. The one that no one's talked about is HOSPA, which is the Hospitality Professionals Association. And if we could get something like that where you're dealing with trusted advisors being involved, who have an ear in many different little businesses throughout, from accountants like Paul and others, and it's getting those guys and getting them involved and getting them to give feedback, and whether professionals feel comfortable doing that or not. But we all see the underlying issues behind every business, and we look at hundreds of businesses a year. So surely we should be able to come back to talk about the issues that they're facing. I mean, I've very much built my PR around understanding the intricate businesses that and the problems that the trade faces. And I think it's something that we don't do enough of, is talking about those issues and how to overcome them and providing solutions. Rather than just identifying the problems, it's finding the solutions to them and clearly highlighting those from an operational point of view that can be applied across multiple different types of businesses.
That does seem to be the heart of it, doesn't it? Andrea, can I bring you in here? Because I suspect you have quite a lot of views on this piece.
Hi there, hi everybody. I just wanted to explain how the STA Council works, because from what I'm hearing, maybe not everyone understands exactly how that works. So the STA Council actually has representation from membership organisations and collective regional bodies such as ASSC, ASFA, Scottish Gardens, UK Hospitality, all the DMOs across the whole of Scotland. Scottish Licensed Trade sit on it, Go Rural, Caravan and Motorhome Club, ourselves. So there's probably about 25 different membership organisations that sit on the STA Council. We meet 2-3 times a year, but obviously since lockdown, we've actually been meeting weekly. And those council meetings have been attended by between 35 and 50 people each time. Each of those meetings representing many small businesses and large businesses across Scotland. Fergus Ewing also attends those meetings every week. Everybody gets the opportunity to put their court case for their particular organisation. Most of the organisations have done surveys of their members around how many of them have achieved the pivotal loan grant, how many people have got the hardship grant, how many people are looking at going out of business, how many people are looking at reopening. So all of that information comes back to the group, and particular issues that are relevant to each individual sector type or destination also has the ability to be tabled. And Fergus Ewing and Bettina from the Scottish Government are taking notes on that and coming back to us every week with responses. Also, Mark Rothall and other members of STA meet on the STIR group once a week. So they give us up-to-date information about what's happening within government around reopening plans and things like that. So Fergus, yesterday we had 47 people on the call, confirmed that SAGE, a UK SAGE group, will be confirming by the 10th of June whether they're going to relax the 2 metre to 1 metre or 1.5. That's under consideration at the moment. By the 10th of June, they'll be announcing that. By the 18th of June, the Scottish Government have said that they expect to be able to announce the reopening protocols. That's been led by DCMS because all 4 nations have agreed they want to have some kind of standardised standard protocols across the whole of the UK. There may be some slight regional differences between the countries, but they want to be consistent in their message to businesses and also to consumers. So they're looking at that kind of issue. So I think the representation from food services on the STA Council is really low. Scotland Food and Drink attend occasionally, but they're not really representing everybody because they're more of a trade association. Visit Scotland come on from time to time, Scottish Enterprise, and we invite people like Alva and people like that to come and give us experiences of what they've got in other parts of the UK. But I think if you wanted to get onto an organisation that give the food service side of things, that the STA would be a really good opportunity for you to do that, and you would hear what other parts of the industry were experiencing.
Thank you, Andrea. Kenny, can I bring you in this point? Kenny, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah,
on you go. Just to echo what Gary was saying about looking at other countries and what we do. If you look at the football model where Germany started playing football and everyone looked at what Germany were doing and then they tried to copy that, I think that's what we should be doing a lot more of. I think we've got to go from the 2 to the 1 safely and talking about focusing on one thing. And I think Italy, as Marco touched on, are probably the best example. They had it the worst, and that was in the press. They had it the worst, and we seem to be about 3 or 4 weeks behind their curve. And if they are now opening hotels and restaurants and getting back to normal, are they at 1.5 meters, Marco? Is it 1.5 meters in Italy at the minute? Is it 1 meter now? Yeah, so I think to go back to the start, from Mark and a Thomas Frank Scotland point of view, we're kind of at the startup stage, and obviously we picked the worst time to do that. So it's really, we're now looking at how we can diversify and look at different. It's not just the school sectors, it's not just B&I. We're looking at charity stuff at the minute, care homes, prison service. I think but if we don't move from the 2 to the 1 quite soon, I just can't see it being anything other than doom and gloom until then.
There's something more as well that you need to get from the other countries. It's not only the procedures that have taken place, but also what's the consumer reaction to that?
Yes.
Our consumer, because at the moment we don't know what our consumers are going to do with the changes and the vagaries of how we're operating at the moment, and everybody going their own sort of simple way. We're very clean. That's all we say.
Yeah, I think it was Lawrence that said focusing on one thing at a time, and I don't know if focusing on that, going from 2 to 1, and everyone had to focus on that, and everyone was behind that, and there was a lot more weight behind it, then it might speed the process along. But as I said, I'm not a scientist either, so I don't know the science. But if Italy are doing it, I think we should really be focusing on what they're doing and how they're doing it.
In fairness, I think UKH are doing quite a lot of work campaigning for that at the moment.
Yeah.
But again, it's actually how we learn the science at the same time.
Yes, I'm also in a position where we have 2 or 3 conference calls a week with Frank, and the schools opened in England on Monday. So I'm sitting there all talking about, we're going to do this, we're doing it. And we're in a bit of limbo. You know, people have said, you know, we're using this 3 weeks thing as a bit of an excuse. I don't think, it doesn't seem like there's much of a choice because we're still in that element of lockdown. But so I'm very jealous when I'm listening to other people and say, yeah, we're getting back, we're doing this, we're doing that. And I'm just kind of sitting there like the boy in the corner, a bit depressed about it all. So.
Fair play. Anne, can I bring you in here? Hi, Anne.
Is it me?
Yep, you. I just wanted to hear your views on all this about collaboration and learning.
Well, you must have read my mind because it's been really interesting today, but I have also, Anne Lee and I have talked about some of the work ahead, and I realized that I'm coming in from a very, very niche place, and it's not the bullseye in relation to the conversations that's taking place today. I'm very well aware of that, and we will always be thinking public health more than maybe business. But we have started to think about what our award could look like, and the way forward, whether we're thinking about standards, and we're also thinking about what relevance is this to the sector ahead. Do we have a role to play Would you be thinking differently? Is obesity, healthy eating going to be an issue in the industry in the future? And is there anything that we can do that? So Anne and I asked, Anne couldn't be here today, so she asked me today to ask if you are aware of any of the issues that might come our way in public health, that we would be very, very welcoming to have a chat or to get access to your thoughts, your ideas, and any reports. In terms of the rest of the discussion today, it's just interesting for us to hear what problems and what issues you are. And I've certainly taken a lot of notes. I'm going to follow up because some of these organizations that you're talking about, I'm not familiar with at all. And I know we want to go back to the conversation about it. But we would really appreciate if you're coming across anything to do with public health, obesity, healthy eating. Keep us in mind because we want to have a dialogue at some point.
No, delighted to. Delighted. Donald, can I bring you in at this point?
Yeah, sure. Just very interesting to hear the various views and just picking up on a couple of them. One is I'm struck by the fact that collaboration really is all the more powerful if it is focused on particular issues and these issues resonate with a particular audience. Otherwise, there's a risk that it could just become continuous talking shop in a sense. It's also possibly the case that the formal representative bodies that already exist, understandably and quite rightly, are at present preoccupied with survival and the big issues, big challenges facing the sector. But is there a risk that that means that other issues will be pushed into the periphery? So things we were talking about previously, whether it's immigration or innovation or skills or whatever else, are we going to take our eye off the ball on these issues? There is a risk setting up, I suppose, another body that it just becomes lost in the melee and, you know, might have a voice for a while, but how effective would it be actually over time? I actually think one of the things that you're doing, just bringing together people who have something worth saying, is distinctive from what other bodies are able to do, and maybe just taking what you're already doing a bit further, you know, inviting particular people to address a group of influential players from the Scottish scene, using these discussions to form legacy projects and so on. Maybe it's about, you know, capturing what you've already got here and taking it to the next stage. The only other thing I'd say is on collaboration that there is a risk that representative bodies focus on challenges and negatives in a sense. And again, quite rightly, that's a very important part of the role, getting over hurdles. But you know, when the industry is facing challenges, it also needs good news. We need to work together to change perceptions in the wider world. And is there a case sometimes for actually focusing on the positive contribution that the sector is making, and how can collaboration help engender a sense of sort of positive energy?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the things I found really strange is that on one hand you get a lot of doom and gloom discussions about threats, but actually when you're talking particularly to young emerging leaders who've got their own businesses, they're invariably positive.
Absolutely. And also on that, you know, there's so much creativity has come out of the last few months. Yeah. People are thinking differently about how to deal with a new situation, and there's a lot to learn there. A bit like Gary Maclean was saying, there's a lot to learn just by listening to other people who are doing things differently, and that can be quite inspiring, and that can drive change. So that kind of upbeat stuff is very important as well.
No, I absolutely agree on that. I mean, I find it all the time. I just don't. It's just interesting. You almost feel like you're in two different worlds a lot of the time, which is fascinating. Sorry, Alex, over to you.
I was just going to say, Gary Maclean, we did something on Swiss Education Group and how they represent a whole lot of universities, hospitality organisations out in Switzerland, and they're actively marketing themselves over here to encourage students to get into hospitality and attend their schools. And they are very much not business as usual, but they're very proactive and very upbeat about what's happening over there. I'll send you a release we put out about it, because it was great to see to hear what they're doing, and if we can copy even a fraction of that positive PR and bring it over to try and encourage and enthuse individuals over here and say, look, there are different ways of working, but it is working. Then it's a positive message to put out.
Yeah. Is it as simple as maybe even doing a story, doing a press release on a good news story on whether it's a education sector or whether it's a hospitality sector, and look at good practice and how people are adjusting? Because it was quite interesting to see the differences in countries on how they tackled with it, you know, and it was every corner of the world, you know, so it seemed to be the ones with less numbers were more extreme, you know, they would, for instance, New Zealand, they had a pod of a lecturer would teach a pod of students everything. And again, I presume it's a much smaller college than what we're used to, but they podded people together, so there was less interaction throughout the whole college and stuff like that. But there was some interesting stuff. If anything, it would make good reading, I think. You know, whether or not it's what we do going forward, I don't know.
Sure, but people get inspiration from that. They don't have to cover. You don't have to copy everything that's done.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just to see different points of views and how different cultures are tackling it. You know, so I mean, look at Africa. They're really not doing much. I mean, they're back at it. Even in Paris, in the middle of everything, I was getting stuff sent, and there was no social distance. There was, you know, a government minister sitting with full clothes on, no mask, making food for the poor. And this was right in the heart of it. So it's amazing how different cultures are coping with it. And the reality is the UK hasn't coped well with it. We haven't done a good job. You know,
can I just bring Andrea in? I was just about to ask you, Andrea, if that's possible. So I saw someone made a comment there on the chat, I think it was Pete, about merging the PR from UKH and STA and other organisations. And I was literally just about to ask you if you wouldn't mind coordinating that and sending it on to us, because you sit on that body, and it would be great to have that and put the messages out, because I'm just not sure how many people or how many operators are able to have access to that. Do they give you much feedback on what's coming out from these meetings, the ones who aren't sitting on them?
Yeah, so I get a daily update from STA around COVID-19, updates on
we get that too.
France and whatever, things like that. I get the same from UK Hospitality and from UK Inbound, because I'm members of all of those. I get weekly summaries of the minutes from the meeting with the UK, with STA, which I'm happy to share. I don't think they would consider it to be, I mean, it's Fergus Youn is there, so it's all publicly available information. What I think is there's a lot of repetition between the different newsletters, because they're all giving you the same information about what the government said today about X, Y, and Z. So to collate the information into one newsletter would take somebody a lot of time. So if people are happy to just get them and filter through them, the information that they want from them, then I'm happy to send that on. And I'd prefer, if I can, to send it on to one of you so you can distribute it to everybody, because then if that's easier, or if you want to send me a list of emails, I'm happy to do that, and I'll just forward it on to a group. But there's lots of really good information that comes from that, if you're happy to filter through the masses of information and obviously lots of repetition.
I think what we could probably do is just have a look at the first lot when you send it through, and then see if we can summarize it in a paragraph, and then some bullet points on the main points that came out, and a quick reference. I don't know, she's very doubtful that's even possible. How much information are we being sent? But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information in there. I mean, it's quite easy to go through. There was all headings and say what's happening about grants, and then obviously UK Inbound, there's a lot of information about overseas markets and when they're going to start coming back to the UK. So there's interest there that might be available, interesting for people who have a lot of international customers. Obviously UK Hospitality is going to be talking about how well Kate's doing in terms of lobbying government, and the UK Hospitality is not an organisation for really good collaboration or networking. It's much more of a lobbying organisation. I found it difficult to get our voice heard within UK Hospitality because they have their key campaigns they're working on. STA, it's much easier to get our voice is heard, any particular issue that you want to raise. And so that's much more, I say, specific to Scotland, and also represents, I would say, the whole industry rather than maybe some of the bigger ones like UK Hospitality do. But I am happy to share those if people are interested in getting it.
That'd be great, Andrea. Thank you.
If you could send me a group of emails, I'll just, as they come in, I'll just forward them.
Great, thank you. Conscious of time, we just want to say thank you to everyone again. It's been a fascinating discussion. There seem to be all kinds of different views. It seems to be split still. There seems to be a framework there which is working effectively or half effectively with government. So we have probably how we get the communication better is one key piece. I don't know, question mark. And the other one is actually more for small business, how we actually really help small business share knowledge and work together, particularly, even if it's just short term, particularly during this period of time. I think, Gary, your point about working in Chamber of Commerce is very logical as well. So I think there's lots of good things that come out of this. So look, it'd be interesting your thoughts afterwards as well. So thank you very much today, and have a great day, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Be in touch.
Bye. Bye-bye.